All right, everybody, welcome back. Welcome back to chapter 7, and the topic is going to be photosynthesis. So we went over cellular respiration, and we said that there were going to be a couple of overlapping concepts that we're going to be seeing in photosynthesis also. So I just wanted to do a brief introduction to photosynthesis and then go over the basics that you need to know. So basically, your objectives are obviously just describe the basic steps of photosynthesis. Okay, with photosynthesis, remember, break the word down. So you're taking basically light energy, which is photo, and synthesis, you're making something. So you're producing something from light energy. What is that going to be? We are going to produce glucose, sugar. So the goal of photosynthesis is to collect energy from the sun, and the energy from the sun is transmitted via discrete bundles of energy known as photons, which will then energize the electrons that are going to be found in the photosystems, which we're going to get to in a second. Then you're going to utilize the chemiosmosis process to create ATP and then harvest the electrons via NADPH. Remember, that's an electron carrier. And then we're going to take the ATP that we produced and the NADPH that we produced using the light energy, so that's via the light-dependent reaction of photosynthesis, to take carbon dioxide, which is an inorganic carbon molecule, and produce glucose, which is an organic carbon molecule. The process of taking inorganic carbon and turning it into an organic carbon molecule is known as carbon fixation. Carbon fixation. Okay, so the overall reaction is pretty simple and it should look very familiar. You're taking 6 carbon dioxide molecules and you're taking the water molecules plus the light, and you're going to produce 6 carbon glucose molecule and oxygen. So if you were to change the direction of the arrow, you're going to recognize that this is also cellular respiration going this way. Glucose plus oxygen can yield carbon dioxide and water. So you can see that it's just the direction of the arrow that's going to allow the direction of the reaction. Okay, so we have 2 basic stages. You have the light-dependent reaction, which have the photosystems, and there are 2 of them. You have photosystem 2 and photosystem 1, which will generate energy. Then you have the light-independent Calvin-Benson cycle, which is going to generate the glucose and the oxygen. All right, so when you look at the summary slide of photosynthesis, okay, again, it looks like a lot is going on here, but remember, at the end of our discussion today, you should be able to explain exactly what is going on in this reaction. So basically, what you're doing is you're taking the light energy from the sun, striking the photosystems, which are found in the chloroplast. They're actually found in the thylakoid, and they're actually, the photosystems are very complex proteins that are embedded in the thylakoid membrane. You're adding water, and basically you're going to generate ATP and NADPH. So the light-dependent reaction is going to take place in the thylakoids, and the dark reactions, we don't really call them dark, it's just light independent, they don't need light to run, will take place in the stroma of the chloroplast. So remember, this is all occurring in the chloroplast. All right, so the summary is basically this. Stage 1, you have the light-dependent photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. That's what PS stands for, photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. Photosystem 2 pigments are going to absorb the light. They're going to energize the electron that will result in the proton motive force, which will then create ATP. With photosystem 1, the energized electrons are going to reduce the NADP plus to form NADPH. If we were to describe the light-dependent reaction, we would describe it as being an exergonic reaction, okay? You're giving off energy, okay? Now, the light-independent Calvin cycle is basically a cyclic reaction where you're going to use the ATP and the NADPH that was produced from the light reaction, and you're going to synthesize glucose from carbon dioxide. If we are synthesizing something, we are building something, it is endergonic. Energy is required for the reaction. Remember, energy is entering. You're using the ATP and NADPH to produce the glucose. So let's take a look at this. This diagram, okay, is showing you the inside of the chloroplast. Specifically, we're focusing on one thylakoid, okay? This is the thylakoid membrane right here. This is the thylakoid space, and this is the stroma. This is the gelatinous fluid that the thylakoids sit in. We have photosystem 2 right here and photosystem 1. The naming is in order of discovery. So photosystem 1 was discovered before photosystem 2, okay? The light energy in step 1, the photon, which is a discrete bundle of energy, will strike this protein, okay? This protein is a specialized protein that has a pigment known as chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is light harvesting pigment. It's a light harvesting pigment, okay? The photon energy is going to cause the water molecule to split, and you're going to produce the electrons from the splitting and the hydrogen ions. The electron is passed to the electron transport chain, and then the hydrogens are going to be pumped across the membrane into the thylakoid space. So here are the hydrogen ions right here. Remember, the buildup, of hydrogen ions is going to cause the hydrogen ions to want to diffuse. Therefore, the hydrogen ions are going to go from the area of high concentration of thylakoid space to low concentration, which is the stroma. And the way that it occurs is, you betcha, look who's here, ATP synthase. Okay, so remember the one hydrogen ion is going to produce the one ATP molecule. How? ATP synthase is going to take the ADP and the phosphate and bring them together. The ATP that's produced is going to then go to the Calvin cycle. With photosystem 1, here we zoomed in on it, photosystem 1, light is going to cause the electrons to be excited, and they're going to move to NADP plus and be reduced to NADPH. So remember, we need to use the NADPH for the production of glucose via the Calvin cycle. So photosystem 2, photosystem 1, okay? Now, again, look at the summary. You can see what else is the splitting of water producing? half a molecule of oxygen. Where's that going to go? Exactly. Oxygen is going to diffuse out of the thylakoid, go into the stroma, then diffuse out of the chloroplast, making its way diffuse out of the cell, and then out of the plant, or if it's algae, out of the algae molecule, and oxygen is going to go into the atmosphere. So that is how photosynthetic organisms produce oxygen for organisms such as ourselves. Okay, so the summary, it's pretty straightforward. The light reaction, okay, the photosystem 2 is going to generate the hydrogen ion concentration gradient, which will result in the process of chemiosmosis, where the hydrogen ions are going to flow from an area of high concentration to low concentration. But remember, the hydrogen ions are large and polar, so they need the help of a transmembrane protein to cross. In this case, it's going to be, again, ATP synthase, which will then result in the production of ATP. Photosystem 1 is going to generate the NADPH via the excited electrons that are going to go to NADP plus, causing the NADP plus to be reduced to NADPH. Remember that both the ATP and the NADPH are going to be used in the Calvin cycle to produce glucose. All right, let's move on to the light independent reaction, also known as a dark reaction, because it does not require sunlight. The light reaction, obviously, due to what we talked about, requires sunlight. But in this case, the Calvin cycle, which is carbon fixation, because you're taking inorganic carbon dioxide and producing organic sugars, does not require light. So what are we doing? We're taking carbon dioxide, the ATP that we produce, the NADPH that we produce, and we are going to generate glucose. ATP is the energy that's required. So basically you need 9 of those molecules. NADPH, again, the electrons for carbon dioxide, and the glucose requires 6 NADPH to be produced. The cycle is a pretty complex cycle, but what I'm going to just ask you about is to be aware of the fact that one carbon dioxide molecule is going to yield a one carbon sugar at the end of one cycle. So then if I were to ask you how many carbon dioxide molecules are required to produce one molecule of glucose, what would your answer be? Again, the question I'm asking, how many molecules of carbon dioxide are required to form a one molecule of glucose? If you answered 6, that is correct. So you need 6 turns of the Calvin cycle to produce one molecule of glucose. So you can see that if we form it takes 3 times to form a 3-carbon sugar, glucose 3-phosphate, G3P, okay? But you can see that it is one carbon dioxide molecule for a 1-carbon sugar. That means you need 6 carbon dioxide molecules for a 6-carbon sugar right here. So you can see all the steps right here. Again, you're not required to memorize them. You just need to know that you're starting off with carbon dioxide and you're going to end up with sugar. And the process is carbon fixation, where you're taking inorganic carbon molecules and producing organic carbon molecules. So again, it's pretty straightforward, not too much there. You'll go over it again more when we cover plants in 182. All right, so summary, you have, again, a summary slide you should be able to explain now. Again, talk to somebody about it, tell the story. Remember, in bio, especially these chapters, it's conceptual. It's very important to go over this with someone and to try to explain it to someone, okay? Now, if we look at cellular respiration photosynthesis, you can see that it's a continuous cycle, okay? Plants are able to undergo both reactions because plants have chloroplasts and they have mitochondria. We do not have chloroplasts, so we need to consume the organisms that have the chloroplasts in them in order to get glucose or to get the sugars in our foods in order to undergo cellular respiration to produce the ATP that we talked about in chapter 6. All right. Don't worry too much about the carbon cycle. There you go. So this is the study guide for terms for both chapter 6 and chapter 7. Okay. So you should be able to obviously explain the concepts that are found in here, but then also not only just memorize the definitions, but use the terms to explain the processes in detail. All right. And then obviously you have the study guide questions. Again, this is chapter 6 and chapter 7. So you should be able to answer all of these questions after going through the review. All right. So a very short lecture, chapter 7, photosynthesis. It will be discussed again in 182. All right. Remember, if you have any questions, please send me an email. If you have time, don't forget to jump in on the Zoom meetings every Tuesday and Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. All right. Take care, everybody.